allows you to escape the all-important question of whether this universe is eternal or whether it has had a beginning. But do you think they are two entirely separate categories?
If you say it one more time, please.
So, do you think that the fear of death, the fear of the unknown, helps you skirt around the question of whether the universe is eternal or whether it has a beginning? Or do you think they're entirely two separate things? Because to me, I would say they're two entirely separate things.
Yeah.
One doesn't impact on the other. So look, let me start off by giving you an understanding of how we as human beings, we go through life, and we would agree that, you know what? There are certain things that all of us would agree upon.
Yeah.
We would agree upon the idea that we can't do something without there being some type of action behind the effect.
That's right.
Would you agree to that?
Yeah.
Yeah. And would you agree that the world that we live in is all established upon causes and effects? That we bring about an effect, for instance, I'm giving you this leaflet, that can only be done by me having the will to give you the leaflet and you having the will to receive it.
Yeah.
These are all causes and effects that are affecting each other.
Yeah.
So, would it be reasonable for me to say that the universe is established upon a law, a universal law, known as the law of causality, that everything occurs through causes and effects? So, it would be reasonable to say that based upon the way we've lived our life, the cumulative understanding of how we go about doing things in life, that things don't just pop into existence out of thin air, right? Things occur because all of these causes and effects come together. Like, for instance, the sun coming down now, the sun coming down onto a plant, the plant going through the exactly, going through photosynthesis and all the rest of it. If there was a cloud in the way, the sun wouldn't be able to get through, and so the photosynthesis wouldn't occur as efficiently in the plant. So these are all causes and effects. So we can whittle all this down to either these causes and effects being eternal, because you suggested that the universe is eternal, or these causes and effects having a beginning at some point. Now, I don't know about you, but given that we all go from one moment to another, I think it's reasonable to say that causes and effects occur in the present, they go out of existence to become the past, and we await for new causes and effects to occur in the future, right? So what we know is the present. We all live in the present. Whether we're traveling at the speed of light, or whether we're near a black hole, or whether we're here on the Earth, we all share the present. That's something that's undeniable. I would say that that's like an intuitive truth. Now, if that's true, then these causes and effects go back, dependent upon each other. So for instance, what's your name, by the way?
Ziggy.
Ziggy. Hamza. Nice to meet you. Ziggy. Now, if I were to say to you that, look, Ziggy, these causes and effects can be represented through a kind of crude thought experiment. If I were to say to you that something wouldn't take place in terms of an effect, except that it requires a cause before it, you and me, we agreed earlier on that that's an obvious thing. So if I were to say to you that, Ziggy, I'm going to give you £1, and you say to me, Hamza, you know what? I'll accept your £1, but I'm not going to take the £1 until you take it from him. And he says, okay, Hamza, you know what? I'll give you the £1 to give to Ziggy, but I'm not going to give you the £1 until he gives me £1. And he goes, well, I'm not going to give you £1 to give to Hamza to give to Ziggy until so-and-so gives me £1. Now, these are all causes and effects that require to take place in order for them to eventually reach me and for me to give you the £1 and for you to graciously accept it, right? Now, these causes and effects are dependent upon each other, meaning that the previous cause can't take place except that it relies upon the cause that came before it, which can't take place except that it relies upon the cause that came before it, ad infinitum. But if I were to say to you that if the universe was eternal, is there ever a point at which we here right now, at this present moment in time, could have come into existence without there being a beginning to the cause, to the first cause?
I see what you're saying, but it's like, in my eyes, that's like, that makes sense, but in my eyes, that's like, in terms of things that like our existence, it's not something that you can pinpoint on like, oh, it must be from a cause of another effect. Like, because you're saying that it must have been from a cause of a cause of a cause of a cause. But you're not...
Because remember, you said that the universe is eternal.
Yeah.
That means there's an eternal chain of causes that extend into the past, right?
Right.
So think about the concept of eternality.
Yeah.
It doesn't have a beginning. So no matter how far you go back into the past, there will always be a cause that preceded the earliest cause you can ever try to envisage or imagine. And even if you go -1 in accordance to that, there is a cause that preceded that. Causes and effects are required in order for us to reach this moment in time, because you're saying the universe is eternal. So the question therefore arises, it would seem impossible for us to reach this point if the causes and effects that allowed us to reach this point are dependent upon an eternal chain of causes that extend into the past. So the only reasonable answer to this is that the universe must have therefore either been non-existent, or it's existent but it has a beginning in time. Does that kind of make sense to you? Now, with that understanding, what we have is something that coalesces with the vast majority of scientists say today, which is that the universe that we live in indeed had a beginning point. It had a beginning point in what they call the Big Bang, right? The origin of space and time. Matter was brought into existence, and time occurred from that point. But here's the next question. Is it possible for nothingness, because if we believe the universe had a beginning, there was a point where it was non-existent. Is it possible for nothingness, which is the absence of energy, space? I mean, it's a difficult thing to... Absolutely anything, right? Is it possible for the absence of anything, to bring something into existence? Think about the cumulative understanding that you've acquired in life. That things don't just pop into existence by themselves. Remember I made that point?
So no, it wouldn't.
So if it's not possible for things to just pop into existence, like a fairy just suddenly appearing, not only does that go against our intuitive understanding of reality, but think about the absurdity of that, which is that if you go back to the point at the beginning of the universe, it's impossible for nothing to bring about something. Because if something can't bring about a fairy, then nothing can't bring about the universe.
I get what you're saying, and to be honest, I pretty much agree.
Here's the punchline. In the Quran, God says, "Afillahi shak." Is there any doubt? Fatir as-samawati wal-ard, in the creator of all that exists, in the creator of the heavens and the earth. In the Quran, 1400 years ago, we're talking about the pagan Arabs who were worshipping idols, believed anything and everything under the sun was God. Although they believed in a hierarchy, they believed that there was this one omnipotent being that brought everything to existence, but they had this idea that because they're ignorant and sinful, that they required an intermediary to get to this all-high God, and thus they started creating these idols as a means of intermediary, right? As a means of intercession, sorry. But they understood that there was a creator, a sole, individual, single creator that brought the universe into existence. So even the Quran didn't have to come to them and sort of persuade them that God exists. It was obvious to them. The most ignorant amongst them, the most simple amongst them, those who are who travel through the desert, who are Bedouins, they knew that, you know what, if I see a camel dung, I know that camel dung doesn't just come into existence by itself. I know there's a camel behind that. This is the obvious truth of our lives.
I do agree. If I can, this is a big side chat. I agree. When I say I'm not religious or anything, I disagree with religion. It's not so much that aspect. It's more so. Now, again, this isn't to be offensive.
So don't worry about offense. You just be as open as you want.
From my understanding, I could be misinformed because it's not too much. I'm African, right?
Yeah.
There was a time period where Africans were enslaved by Arabs.
Yep.
And during that time, they were kind of forced, as kind of enslavement happens in colonial households, to teach, Islam and whatnot.
Yeah.
And it's not so much that I disagree with being of God or whatever.
Sure.
It's just that I can't really get behind an idea or a faith. I can't worship something that I know has this type of history.
Okay.
Or like my type of.
If you don't mind, can we go through that? Just sort of slowly but surely unpack that? Because obviously that seems like a very emotive subject for you.
Yeah, I'm a Pan-Africanist. I'm Africa first. You know
Yeah. I mean, for us, the understanding, the origin of mankind is in a man named Adam and his wife Eve. And the Quran actually teaches us that Adam and Eve were actually of a dark skin color. Noah was actually referred to as a man who was of extremely dark skin. Abraham was from Arabia. Now, if you were to go back to Arabia now, you'll see that people, a lot of them, they have a complexion like mine, and even more fairer. But that's only because of the fact that Arabia went through that period of time where it began to coalesce with other civilizations, etc. And there was a crisscrossing of ethnicities and cultures and genes and so on and so forth. And so with that, there became a dilution of what truly is an Arab. But there have been a number of scholars from Islam who've said that if you were to go back, literally time travel back to the point when the Prophet Muhammad was designated as a prophet at the age of 40, you'd be stunned to find that the Arabs of that time would have been closer to that black man back there than me. And this is the extraordinary thing, that the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, he came to teach people, and this is, you can encompass Islam in this simple way. It was the establishment of rights.
That's what religion is, though.
Exactly. And the most important right would be what? What do you think would be the most important right, Siggy?
What, for life in general?
In general. What would be the most important right for a person who follows a religion? Got it. And then the other rights that come thereafter. Because there is no greater right upon a created being except that he or she recognizes that they're created, therefore contingent, meaning dependent. And therefore there should be some level of gratitude after the recognition. So the Prophet Muhammad, when he came with a message that was exactly the same with all the prophets and messengers that came before him. Now, if you don't know about it, Muslims, we believe in the prophets of the Old and New Testament, by and large. We believe in the 5 great messengers of God. Noah, as I mentioned, was a dark-skinned black man. Abraham, his 2 sons, Isaac and Ishmael. Through Isaac came the children of Israel. Through Ishmael came the Arabs. And through the children of Isaac came the other prophets. David, Joshua, you name them. Right? Solomon, culminating with the last and final messenger from that line, Jesus upon whom be peace. Whom, by the way, we don't believe is God on earth, is a man God or anything like that. We believe all the prophets and messengers were men, although elevated through them being purified and chosen amongst the men of all the nations. From the Arab side, there was only one man in history who came out openly and said, I am a messenger of God. That was Muhammad, the son of Abdullah. Now, they all came with a singular message. And it wasn't to worship me, which is Muhammad or Jesus or Solomon. They never called to the worship of themselves. They called people away from the worship of created things to the worship of the one true God, Allah. That was the greatest right that they were commissioned with. Why? Because in the Quran, God gives Muslims a very clear understanding of what our purpose in life is. And it is encompassed in a very short Arabic phrase. It says, وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. I did not create jinn, which is an alternate form of life, like the angels, nor mankind, except that he worshipped me. That's it. That's our collective purpose in life, to worship God. To the point where the Prophet Muhammad, upon him be peace, on his last sermon before he passed away in front of 100,000 of his companions in the Arabian Peninsula, you can imagine 100,000, he's addressing them. He came out with a statement which effectively, if a Muslim follows his religion properly, there is no racial discrimination. There is no cultural discrimination, to the point where he said that no Arab, no black man has superiority over a white man, nor a white man has superiority over a black man. nor an Arab over a non-Arab, nor a non-Arab over an Arab, except, and here's the exception, Ziggy, except through piety and good deeds. There was never this understanding amongst the prophets that a person can just say, oh, I believe, and that's it. It had to be proven. You have to walk the walk. You have to prove it.
Yeah, you have to get your stripes.
Exactly. So in the Quran, you will never find God saying, believe, and that's it. So Islam is established upon 5 pillars. The first is what the prophets and messengers called mankind to. And what I'm trying to impress upon you, Ziggy, that we have a purpose in life that goes back, right back to the first individual. That there is none worthy of worship in truth except God. And that the second one was prayers, the 5 daily prayers. So the second pillar was the 5 daily prayers, which is to prove that, you know what, I've now claimed that I'm a Muslim, but God has now commanded me, the one who brought everything into existence, the one who I'm going to go back to, He's commanded me to do certain things, and I should show some type of gratitude. I should be grateful to this individual. So,
I have a little question.
just very quickly, because I want to really impress upon you the idea of how racism was obliterated right from the beginning. Have you heard of a man named Malcolm X? You must have heard of Malcolm X, right? You probably know about him, a little bit about him, right? So you know about how he went to, when he was part of the racist Nation of Islam, who claimed that Elijah Muhammad was a black man in the form of God, in order to mirror the idea of the Christian white, right? He left the Nation of Islam and became an Orthodox Muslim, and then he decided to make pilgrimage to Hajj, to Mecca, where all the Muslims, they come together, they're obligated. This is the 5th pillar of Islam, by the way. So the first pillar of the belief in God, the second is praying 5 times a day, the third is giving 2.5% of your surplus wealth to the poor, the fourth is praying, fasting during the month of Ramadan, which is just come and gone, and the 5th is, if you can afford to go and do pilgrimage of the house of God, not that he lives there, but it belongs to him, so that you may come together as part of the fraternity of brotherhood in Islam and sisterhood, and recognize that this form of worship doesn't just go back to Muhammad's time, it goes back to the Abraham and Ishmael. They were the ones that first established this. So he went there and he wrote back to his wife. He said, and I know it by heart, he said, I have eaten from the same plate and I've drunk from the same glass of a man whose eyes are the bluest of blue and whose skin color is the whitest of white. But the racist white attitude has been expunged from him. He said, if there is one solution to the racism of America today, it is Islam. The reason why when we come together, I don't see this man as a black man, and he doesn't see me as a brown man. We see each other as Muslims in faith. And the Prophet himself, he said, that the Muslim is a mirror. He is a mirror to his brother. Do you know what that means, Sigi? It means that if you were to become part of our brotherhood, a true Muslim is a person who reflects his friend's faults back to him. Because unless you're an Adonis, you look into the mirror to fix your faults, right? A little strand of hair out of place, you put it back in place or whatever, right? That's what the Prophet said. He said, your brothers are a mirror to you. And he also said that this religion is knowledge. So one of our scholars said, this religion is knowledge, so look to see whom you take it from. Meaning that follow the people of truth and be with them. Yeah? So Islam came to get rid of racism and it established the rights of God. And then there's a verse in the Quran in chapter 7 where it says, God says to Muhammad, should I inform you upon whom your God has forbidden you to do? What your God has forbidden you to do? The first is the most important right, which is that you do not associate any partners in the worship of God. Whether that be in the form of idols, human beings, animals, the sun and the moon, anything in creation is forbidden. In fact, it is considered the worst crime against God, because you're giving something that is an obvious right of God to other than Him. Then the verse continues and it says, and that you be dutiful to your parents. In fact, the word there is ihsanan. That's in the superlative of the language. It means don't just be good to him, you have to be the best version that you can towards your mother and father. There's no compromise. You have to be the best version. Even if they're rude to you, you have to be the best version you can to them. So there's another verse in the Quran where God says that if one of them or both of them reach old age, extend a wing of humility over them and do not say oof. Forget beating them, forget throwing them in an old people's home like we find today. God is saying you can't even make a gesture, a sound of disrespect to your mother and father. That is the rank that the mother and father have after who? God himself. And then the verse continues and it says, and that you do not kill your children out of fear of poverty, because God feeds them and he feeds you. Why is he saying this? Because, do you know about this?
I mean, I don't know about this too much, but I saw like a related video about something similar.
Okay.
Again, bringing it back to Africa, in Africa they got this really big Christianity problem where they're still on the grist with Christianity. They really
Yeah.
So there's this like interview I saw recently where it's kind of like a product of capitalism, if you will, where what did you said? You just said something about do not kill your kids.
Do not kill your infants babies, out of fear of poverty.
And it's like things like that are just the things that I can't quite agree with, because in a society today where it's like the common man, it's getting harder for them to, raise a family and whatnot. And I don't think it'll be right to consider it a sin. In their eyes, they don't want their kids to suffer.
Right.
Because, like, while, the Quran would, in your guys' respectful, idea, is the first initiation of law and whatnot, there still had to be some concepts of, like, things for society to run before that, you know what I'm saying?
Sure. But what you're talking about is an exception to the rule. In most societies, the idea of not having children because you fear bringing them into a world of poverty, etc., isn't really the rule. The rule is that people, they require to procreate to carry on their progeny, to carry on existence. That's the general rule of mankind. So Islam didn't come for the exceptions to the rule or the extreme exceptions. It came for the rule itself. This is the beauty of Islam. It came to teach people that which their intuitive nature would easily find compatible. They would never say that, I don't agree to the idea that if your child is born a girl, that you bury them alive in the middle of the desert. Unfortunately, this is still taking place in countries that are known as that call themselves democracies. In India, it is an epidemic that if the woman finds that she's about to give birth to a baby girl, through the luxury of hindsight and the ultrasound, she goes and aborts it because she knows her husband and her family are going to think, you know what? You are a curse to us. You're cursed. They blame the woman. Can you imagine that mindset? So in Arabia, they came to this despicable idea because they turned away from the true teachings of God, that if a baby girl is born, it's better for you to bury it alive in the sands. And one of the women, the first martyr of Islam was a woman. Her name was Sumayya. She said that my baby girl, the first one, held on to my finger whilst we buried her alive. And she said, I'm not going to go through that again. I'm not going to go through that again. So Islam came, the next thing was, do not kill your children out of fear of poverty, because God is assuring the believer that God is the one that provides for you. Just as he brought you into existence, just as he knows everything that takes place in the universe. In fact, God says that there is not a leaf that falls except that he knows. There's not a leaf that falls. He says, I am closer to you than your own jugular vein, by way of his knowledge. So for the Muslim, there is nowhere to hide. The Prophet Muhammad, he told us about faith. He says faith is of 3 levels. A person who's a Muslim, a person who's a mu'min, and a person who's a muhsin. A Muslim is, if you were to give your declaration of faith and come into the folds of Islam, you would become a Muslim. But that would be the beginning. Now you have to develop your faith. You have to work at it. You have to increase that spirituality. By proving, exactly. And that is what the Prophet Muhammad spoke about, except through piety and good deeds. It is the good deeds that are related to the heart. And the heart is the thing that we're supposed to cultivate and nurture. so that it gives us a chance on the Day of Judgment to stand before our Creator and say, I tried my best. And we know God is merciful and beneficent. He cites that constantly right throughout the Quran. But let me just go back. So
I don't mean to cut you off.
Yeah, sure.
I do need to go in like 5 minutes because I am meeting friends.
Oh, okay, no worries, no worries. You got 5 minutes?
What do you think of what he said?
I mean, I don't disagree with anything. I'm learning a lot more about it.
So what would stop you from becoming a Muslim?
He spoke about organized religion, his fear of organized religion.
But Islam is not a religion, it's a way of life, it's a deen.
You can say that. Sorry, I don't mean to cut you off.
No, continue, brother.
You can say that, and that's how it may be intended. But unfortunately, in like the society we live in today, it's just there's too many examples where, like, even you brought up a rule earlier where there was something along the lines of like a prophet cannot be a woman or something like that. And it's like, when we're talking about actions and consequences, having a line like that in the Quran, in my eyes, kind of sets up this whole history of struggle for women in, countries within that culture.
Okay.
And while it might not have been the true intention of the Quran, that is something we have to accept.
What was this?
So the issue here is the following. If there is a creator, and the creator brought us into existence for a purpose, and we recognize that purpose, then the question then arises, I'm going to break it all down because I know you've got 5 minutes, then the question then arises, who is in the best place to determine what that purpose is and how you're supposed to live your life? Is it the creator, or is it yourself as a human being, a fallible individual who may in fact be part of a system that itself is fallible? These are questions you need to ask yourself, Ziggy. And we only have a very short period of time on this earth before the end comes. Exactly, and we need to determine for ourselves the best course of life, not the second best course of life. If the truth comes our way, the sincere individual is the one who grabs a hold of the truth immediately. You don't need to go studying for 10, 15 years. When a person comes to you and says, the universe had one creator alone. You don't need to go around studying whether there's a better way of life when that way of life is telling you, be good to your parents the best that you can be. Don't kill your children. Don't kill anyone whom it is unlawful for you to kill, except upon justice. And do not come near the wealth of the orphans, except to better it. The verse is continuing. So these are all Islam came to do is establish the rights that God has designated, not as we estimate, but us submitting ourselves to what God has given to us. And I'm telling you, Ziggy, what God has given to us will be intuitive with your nature, the foundational aspects of your nature. Now, there may be things there that when you study Islam, you may think, you know what, I find that hard to accept. But is that because it's a fault on your part, or is it a fault on the part that you've already recognized is from the creator of all that exists, the one who has more knowledge of what he created than we do? So it has to stand to reason that if we turn away from the source, we're going to be left to what? Our own devices. And that's when problems arise.
That does make sense.
And in the Quran, God says that وَسَاءَ مَا يَحْكُمُونَ. Evil is what they estimate. You know why? Because they've turned away from God. They've turned away from God. So look, here's a gift to us, to you, Ziggy.
It's a gift. It's a Quran there. Read it at your own time. We're here every Saturday. So we appreciate your time.
I appreciate you, man.
Ziggy, look after yourself, mate. Take care, right? Look after yourself.
Wrap it up. Wrap it up.
Sorry, this is yours?
Yeah.